I'm Jenę 65.
The air in the dining room was thick with tension, as if a storm was about to break. My grandson, Ethan, had just opened the worn-out wooden box I'd given him, and a yellowed photograph had slipped out onto the table. Ethan's eyes were wide with shock as he picked up the picture, showing a much younger Mark, my son, looking worried and defeated. "Is that Dad?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling. Before I could answer, my daughter-in-law, Victoria, tried to grab the photo, but Ethan pulled it away. The room fell silent, and I knew it was time to tell the truth that had been buried for so long. It all started 30 years ago. Mark was 26 then, full of ambition. He had just opened a small tech startup in the emerging digital market. At first, things seemed to be going well. He was always talking about his big plans, his dreams of making it big in the tech world. But one night, he showed up at my door, looking like a broken man. He was in tears, barely able to speak. He finally confessed that his business was on the verge of collapse. He had taken out huge loans from some shady investors to keep it afloat. These were not just ordinary loans. The investors were threatening him with legal action and worse. He owed them a staggering $200,000, a sum that was almost impossible for him to pay back. I was a widow by then. My husband had passed away 5 years earlier, and I was living on his pension and my part-time job at the local library. I didn't have that kind of money, but I did have one asset, the family home. It was a small, cozy house where Mark had grown up. It had been paid off years ago, and the neighborhood was becoming trendy, so it was worth about $250,000. Without hesitation, I decided to sell the house. It was the only home I'd ever known, filled with countless memories of my family. But I knew I had to help my son. I gave Mark the money to pay off those loans, and enough to start a new, more legitimate business. After selling the house, I rented a tiny apartment. It was a far cry from my old home, but I didn't complain. I thought family was more important than a house. I hoped that Mark would turn things around, and that our relationship would stay as close as it used to be. But as time went on, things changed. Mark's new business struggled for years. He got married to Victoria, and they had Ethan. They bought a big house and started a new life, but I was gradually pushed to the sidelines. Mark started telling Ethan that I had never supported his dreams, that I was a controlling person. Victoria, too, made it clear that she didn't want me around. I kept quiet, thinking that if I didn't make a fuss, things would eventually get better. I sent Ethan birthday cards, handmade gifts, and notes, but most of the time, I never got a response. I called the school every year to get copies of Ethan's school photos, just so I could watch him grow up from afar. Fast forward to Ethan's 18th birthday. I spent weeks choosing the perfect gift for him. I wrapped it in old comic strips, a tradition we used to have when he was a kid. When I arrived at the party, Victoria greeted me with a cold smile. She made it clear that I was early and that I wasn't really needed. During dinner, Victoria introduced me as the difficult old woman who had caused problems in the family. I was humiliated, but I held my head high. When it was time for presents, Ethan insisted on opening mine first. Inside the box was not just a simple gift, but a collection of our family's real story. As Ethan started to read through the old documents, letters, and the diary I had kept, the truth began to unfold. Victoria tried to stop him, but it was too late. The secrets that had been hidden for 30 years were finally out in the open. There was also a newspaper article about Mark's old business. It revealed that he had been involved in an investment scandal and was on the verge of being charged. The reason the charges were dropped was that I had used my brother's connections. My brother, Henry, was a well-respected lawyer. I begged him to help Mark, and he used his influence to make the case go away. It was an illegal act, but I did it for my son. Ethan was in shock. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He looked at Mark, his eyes filled with disappointment. "Dad, how could you let Grandma be treated like this?" he asked. Mark's face turned pale. He finally admitted that he had let guilt consume him. He had convinced himself that I was trying to control him, and he had let Victoria paint me as the villain. I looked at Mark and said, "I did everything for you, for our family. I was afraid that if I spoke up, it would only push you further away. I was protecting you." Ethan then reached into the box and found the keys to an apartment and a bank statement. I explained that I had bought the apartment 10 years ago as an investment. I had been renting it out, and the money was in a trust for him, which matured on his 18th birthday. It was my way of making sure he had a good start in life, even though I was kept away. Ethan was deeply moved. He picked up the box and came to sit beside me at the end of the table. "I want to know everything," he said. Mark then did something I never expected. He stood up and moved to my other side. "You're right, Ethan. I need to hear the truth, too," he said, his voice full of regret. Victoria was left alone at the other end of the table. Her carefully constructed story about me was falling apart. She finally broke down and admitted that she had been trying to protect Mark from the shame, but in doing so, she had made me the villain. As we sat there, the tension in the room started to ease. We still had a long way to go to heal the wounds, but for the first time in 30 years, I felt like I was part of the family again. The truth had been spoken, and it was time to start making new memories together.